Hello and a very good afternoon to all of you. I am Palav, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of eMobility Plus and First View Group. Our today's webinar titled Post Budget Analysis 2022, specifically for the e-mobility sector, brought all of us together on this common virtual platform to have a 360-degree overview on what the year budget 2022 had in kitty for the sector, and how the budget hits and what it misses out for the much promising EV industry. So over to you, Uday.
Uh, Pallav, we can't hear you. I don't know about others, but I can't hear
Uh,
you.
Pallav, you're not audible.
No, it's not audible here either.
Pallav, we can't hear you.
Uh, Pallab, we cannot hear you, so let me introduce. Pallab, you are not audible. No issues. I'll just introduce you all. So hello everyone, and a very good afternoon to all of you. I'm Anand, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of eMobility Plus and First View Group. Our today's webinar titled Post Budget Analysis 2022 E-Mobility Sector Special brought all of us together on this common virtual platform to have 360-degree overview on what the Union Budget 2022 has in its kitty for the entire e-mobility industry. What the budget hits and what it has missed out for the much promising industry. So without any delay, it's time to start the panel discussion for this. We are honored to have with us Mr. Shamsher Diwan, ICAR, who is also the moderator for this session, Sri Randhir Singh, Niti Ayog, Sri Anil Srivastava, Amara Raja, Mr. Uday Narang, Omega Sekhi Mobility, Mr. Parth Chaudhary, LML Electric, Mr. Ankur Madan, Charge Up, Mr. Rajiv YSR, Atom Motors, Mr. Praveen Kumar, Go Ego Network. But before handing over the session to Mr. Diwan, I would like to make a small announcement for all our attendees. If you have any question during the discussion, please post them in the Q&A box. Our panelists will take those questions at the end of the discussion. Now, I would like to welcome all the panelists on the screen and requesting Mr. Diwan to lead the discussion. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Anand. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to e-mobility's session on the post-budget analysis on the electric vehicle sector. My name is Shamsher Diwan, and I'm part of ICRA's corporate ratings team. It is my pleasure to be part of this session and moderate a discussion on one of the most important developments in the industry that we see today. If there were two words with which we could describe the current state of the automobile industry, these would be disruption and excitement. Disruption, because with the emergence of e mobility, virtually everything is expected to undergo a change, right from vehicles to technology and competitive landscape, especially with the advent of various startups and new ideas. Excitement, because it provides all of us with immense opportunities to contribute towards a greener mobility and a much healthier environment. Without further delay, let me get into the webinar now and a Q&A session with all the esteemed panel members. If I can first start, Mr. Randhir Singh ji, with you. In the recent budget, the finance minister announced that we are likely to have a battery swapping policy very soon. If you look at the entire ecosystem that is panning out for the EV sector, right from the initiation of FAME 2 policy to announcement of ACC policy for PLI and for auto component, this was perhaps one of the missing pieces in the entire puzzle when it comes to electric vehicles. So, sir, given the fact that now the government is planning to come out with a battery swapping policy in the next few months, what, in your views, will be the key focus area of this policy, especially given the fact that today most of the EVs that we see today are E two wheelers and E three wheelers?
Uh, Thank you, Mr. Diwan, and thank you for having me here. In fact, it is the most pertinent question, I should say, that battery swapping policy right now. And in fact, after fame to most of the, not only the battery OEMs but the vehicle OEMs, they also approached us that whenever the remodeling of the fame 2 is going to happen, please include the battery swapping and the battery as a service. But we don't have the interoperability standards available. Not only in India, across the world, no country has the interoperability standards in terms of the battery swapping. However, from the India perspective, we have taken this stand, and now we are going to do two different things. One is fix the battery standards as well as the interoperability standards. Second thing is also come out with a policy across this. Now, to be very specific, what all things we have to address actually this, so I can point out four different things within the policy and the standards. First thing is about the general guidelines and the pack dimensions. So whatever battery is going to be used. So idea is that it should work in two way. One is from the charging side, it should be interoperable. From the discharging side also it should be interoperable. So where the charging happens? Charging happens at the swapping station. So it is, if I just want to give the analogy, it's just like the ATM and the ATM card, where the ATM is like the swapping machine and the ATM card is like the battery.
Right. Sure, sir. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sure. So, have we lost Mr. Singh there, or?
I think he has completed his brief.
Okay, sure. All right. So, if I can come to you, Mr. Narang, now. What were your expectations from the budget with respect to the EV landscape, and how do you see battery swapping policy actually becoming a game changer for the EV industry? I would like to understand from you, since you represent an OEM essentially, what kind of challenges would come, especially when it comes to offering standard solutions across all the OEMs.
Thank you very much for the invite and all these team guests. Look, I think we are really excited. The policy of battery swapping, will help in reducing the upfront ownership cost, and this is something that we really need to think about. The policy, also is expected to encourage private sector, to develop sustainable, innovative business models for battery or energy as a service. And I think this is a really good move that the government has done. The government will facilitate, special mobility zones for EVs, which is also, going to help in the clean air tech and electric mobility, which is extremely important. These changes, obviously, along with the recent PLI schemes for EV, they will help. For this would help the necessary fill up the EV revolution that is going on in this country. I think that the extension of income tax regime for 15% of new domestic manufacturing facility setups for 31st March 2024 is also a welcome move. But you've got to understand, we ourselves about a couple of weeks ago announced with Sun Mobility a 10,000 vehicle swap, in three-wheelers. So we welcome this. We think that this country has demand in the fixed. We've also done fast charging with the likes of Log9, but the battery swapping will give the impetus in the three-wheelers, in the two-wheelers. I think we're bringing four-wheelers, but I don't think that's a way ahead. But I think in the two-wheelers and the four-wheelers, three-wheelers, this is a really good move. I think that the budget was very balanced and, had, growth-oriented, forward-looking budget, which in broad economic development of the country, both on micro and macro fronts, in our view, There are some good announcements in the budgets to promote EV, to promoting charging infra. See, charging infra is also extremely, extremely important right now because we want to talk about electric vehicles, but until we have enough charging, whether it be for fixed or for fast charging or for swap, I think this is a very, very important part. And we have some esteemed guests who are also involved in the charging business. We are setting up our own chargers also across the country. I think that the budget missed one major challenge, which we as OEM, we are continually pushing vehicles, is, adoption and availability of financing for fleets and the credit guarantee from the government. I think this is something that is extremely involved because most of the vehicles need to be financed, especially in the three-wheelers. In the two-wheelers, it's okay, but the financing requirements are needed. I think we set up our own NBFC to provide financing, but we are also working with very large organizational financing. I think the government could have done more on that. And the commercial vehicle industry, I believe, which we're working on the four-wheelers, is ready, for EV. But without the availability of cheap finance, I think this is a major problem. That for an IC engine, you can get easy financing, but I think we need to push more on that because if we want to bring more electric vehicles, we need to bring scale. Scale will come from financing. But again, the battery swap, we welcome it. We think it's a great move. I think that, that's why we align with Sun Mobility to put several 10,000 vehicles in the next year into the market in the last mile, as well as in B2C. Thank you.
Sure. So I would like to ask you a follow-up question here. You talked about a very important issue that grapples the industry today is availability of financing, especially at the retail level. Now, could you share some thoughts right now on what is the current level of financing when it comes to E3-wheeler segment in India?
Sure. I think when we started the journey, and we are among the top. Last month, we were the second largest L5 cargo seller in this country, and hopefully this month will be the top seller of L5 in this country. In the numbers that are actually showing, not the e-rickshaws, which are the lower end. But to answer your question, the financing conditions a year ago were pretty bad, and that's why we had to set up our own NBFC, which is Anglian Finvest to finance. I think today we are seeing the larger players, and I'm very excited to say, Mahindra Finance, Greaves Finance, Manappuram, many people. And we, I come from an international background. I was in Wall Street for 30 years. I am trying to bring major players into this market for financing because the financing game is needed. So I think over the next 2 years, the financing capabilities are increasing. We see on the ground, we've opened up 85 touch points already, and we will be 150 by March. As we go from B to, as we open up across the country and go B2C more and more, I think we are working towards providing financing. I think the numbers are going to be substantial. I am seeing the government banks and private lenders, and I would reach out through this media that the margins and the capabilities, I would be worried, and I'm not saying because I'm a EV, I'm born electric, I only do electric, that I would be concerned of my portfolio in IC engine because 3 to 5 years down the road, in the three-wheelers and the two-wheelers, the resale value of those things is going to be difficult. So I think, but I feel that the bell is ringing in a lot of the big financiers. I think this is a marathon and not a sprint. And we at OSM are working with multiple partners in this. I am seeing a delta move this year alone from 2021 to 21-22, a massive change. I think 22-23 is going to be a big change, and I'm excited about it. And I think a lot of people are coming to this. I would like government to push this more.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense, actually. I mean, as things will move in favor of EVs, the residual value or the resale values for ICE-based vehicles will certainly see some value erosion there. Mr. Rajiv, if I can come to you, sir, I've had an opportunity to, interact with you on a couple of other platforms as well. And if my memory serves me right, you've always had some, contrarian view on battery swapping. So would like to understand and hear from you as to what is your, view on battery swapping. Do you see some challenges there?
Yeah. So I think, thank you very much, first of all, the e-mobility team and Mr. Shamshir Diwan for the opportunity. And Let me build upon the points which my good friend Uday has already mentioned here. If you look at the adoptability of EVs across the world and also in reflection of FAMES 1.0 and FAMES 2.0, the major adoption is happening in three major portfolios, product portfolios. One is the shared mobility, which is basically the electric buses, etc., where the government themselves is the prosumer, right? It's a consumer as well as in a way incentivizer. Then we have two wheelers, and third one we have three wheelers, right? Somehow I would like to put four wheelers aside. Now, even if you look at the subsidies that have been allocated in FAMES 2.0, of the complete 8,500 crores that have been allocated only from demand perspective, right? Rest 1,500 crores are only from charging infra. We see that close to 41% were allocated to bus as a product portfolio, followed by 29% to three wheelers and 23% to two wheelers, which means that the growth accelerators for electric vehicle industry, other than the buses, when we talk about the regular retail as well as the other B2B markets, it is going to be in two wheelers and three wheelers.
Okay.
And I really like I would say, the contextual build of the ecosystem, for a simple reason. 1.5 years ago, while we were discussing, there came a geo which says that a glider can be registered without a battery, right? The first hurdle or a first bottleneck for any EV at the time was considered to be the upfront capital cost, which of course included the 50% of cost that was contributed by the battery as energy alone. And then comes a geo which says that, okay, the glider can be registered, right, demarking the battery. And now we see that being topped up by the initiatives of the government, where they are talking about interoperability and standardization of these batteries and standardization of these, I would say, the energy as a service. And on top of it, the government further says, right, especially for two wheelers and three wheelers, where the energy capacity doesn't necessarily go beyond, say, 10 kilowatt hour, probably for a three wheelers, which can still be built in modular basis of, say, four 2.5 kilowatt hour battery packs, which can be, right, ergonomically handled, replaced, and put forward. And some great, I would say, companies such as Sun Mobility have already proven the proof of concept and then the viability to a certain extent. So, taking all these contexts into one particular, I would say, purview, it is more than convincing for me that we are in the right direction, because the mass adoption is going to happen among two wheelers and three wheelers. Majority of the funds are allocated to two wheelers and three wheelers. With the detachment of glider and the battery, it made easier for retail customers to own up a vehicle, and now topped up by a policy that talks about energy and battery as a service, where more players can come in, where the end customer need not actually own the battery cost, but then pay per usage like the way he does for petrol being filled. I think these are all, I would say, a good signs. However, there is one point that I would like to add, where the probably the budget could have addressed, Mr. Shamshar, with your permission. That
Sure.
is, we are expecting, right? I mean, if you look at the one of the reports published by your own firm, right? We are expecting that India would emerge as not only just a manufacturing hub, but also as a R&D hub by 2030. In fact, the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan, which was probably launched in 2013, and the initial automotive mission plan, which was between 2006 to 2016, both of them were talking about India emerging as an R&D hub for automotive, and especially so for EVs. While it is a fantastic thing that the incentives were given for the PLIs as well as for the battery swapping as a technology, somehow I still feel that the government could do a lot in terms of encouraging the in-house research and development, facilities increase, as well as encouraging the in-house, the skill of the people who are into it. Because the reports say that by 2030, we need, electric vehicle as an industry needs 100 million hands to come together to make India as the hub of global EV market. And for that to happen, not just the incentives from this perspective, but an overall perspective is required. Thank you, Shamshar.
Thank you, sir. Very useful. Let me come to Mr. Chaudhary now. So, if we look at the overall e-two-wheeler segment today, there are two distinct product categories which are emerging. One which is catering to the personal mobility segment, and the other which is catering to the commercial or the fleet segment today. How do you see, a potential battery swapping policy to support the demand for the e-two-wheeler segment, especially the fleet segment today?
Okay. So thank you very much, Mr. Shamsher, and thank you, eMobility Plus, for having me here. Indeed, a great platform to interact. Now, uh, before I answer directly your question, I would like to make one point here. So far, we were observing that the lens through which we are looking at e-vehicle is the similar one as an IC engine vehicle. And the intent was to either match or improve the experience of IC engine vehicle in the similar direction, which means the e-scooters or E2 three-wheelers were to almost, were attempting to mimic the performance of an IC engine vehicle. However, there is a bit of a change that we get to see in some, um, organizations or some, product creators. And the current lens is, and I think that is the right direction, is to create a set of experience through through an electric vehicle, which an IC engine vehicle will not be able to achieve for reasons of their technology limitation. I give you one example, and you would understand what I'm trying to say, and that has great, connect with battery swapping. Now, we take it as given that if you have a vehicle, you have to refuel it, and therefore you have to go to a gas station. That's not a pain, actually. That is taken as a given. But what if tomorrow you are not required to go to a gas station? Then it would emerge as a pain point. It is not possible for any IC engine vehicle to make, to dispense with going to a gas station to fill gas. On the other hand, an electric vehicle can actually refuel itself without, going to any other place. In fact, you can do it at home. And this can actually be supported or enhanced by the concept of battery swapping. Of course, it has to be designed properly. And that can now imagine your refueling is happening without any effort or without any, time allocation on that, which means, in other words, you're actually having an unrestricted range in your vehicle without having to spend any time or effort to do so. This is a very significant distinction or departure from the way how an IC engine vehicle operates. Now, coming to the two-wheeler, the question that you asked, if this is something which is, in a structured way, in an organized manner offered, imagine what it can do. It can create a situation where you actually have something called anytime battery. Now, somebody, if suppose you are using a vehicle which is um, for for your commercial usage, either for uh, cargo delivery or for uh, bike sharing. In that case, you need to control certain points. For example, if somebody comes and takes a bike for sharing reasons, I mean, for some commute, how would you manage the petrol or the gas that is there inside the bike? How much is he consuming? It becomes quite difficult for any IC engine vehicle to control that, because how will you fill gas? So somebody has to take the vehicle to a gas station, fill gas for him. How much has he consumed? You really do not know. On the other hand, if it is a battery and a swappable battery in a structured manner, where the current budget is actually proposing something, and the other speakers have already spoken about it, that you have an interoperability for the batteries in the form factors side, on the charging side, what Mr. Randhir Singh was just trying to say. I think he, abruptly his line connection disconnected. So all these things culminated to a situation where it makes this particular service far more, easier, and for the service provider as well as for the consumer, it becomes a viable solution. Because more and more, as we get to see, and very rightfully pointed out by other speakers, globally we will see that uh, it is rental, or let's say some kind of uh, mm, leasing model for consumption of mobility will emerge. People would more and more drift away from buying vehicles and get into leasing the vehicles for multiple ways. Maybe somebody is leasing it for a month, somebody is leasing it only for a couple of hours, or maybe for a few kilometers, and all those things will be empowered only by a battery swapping, or a structured battery swapping service. Now, for personal mobility front, without battery swapping in two-wheelers, I mean, for a car, battery swapping is difficult, of course. For any vehicle which is smaller in size, battery swapping is very convenient. And minus that, what you fail to achieve is unrestricted range, of which a consumer is already, used to. Even in case of an IC engine vehicle, with the, availability of uh, gas stations, range is, there is no unlimited range. The range is unrestricted. A similar thing happens in case of a swappable battery, offer in a vehicle. At the same time, what happens is, because the battery charging is happening at home, his convenience factor goes up substantially. So my take is, with this particular move by the government, it is in steps. Some time back, it was possible to register a vehicle without the battery. That is something we have been talking about for some time, and then thereafter, this battery swapping as a service is coming in the foray, is coming in the focus of the government. Is a very, very significant move. More than I am a firm believer that by giving mere subsidy, you would not be able to achieve anything, because no one is seeking only cheap solution. People are seeking appropriate solution. If it is not really adding to your convenience or not really increasing your convenience substantially, there is no reason for consumers to actually adopt it. So without these steps, mere subsidy of course is needed for price parity, etc. But if the convenience part or the experience part is not taken care of appropriately, then it will never be a successful adoption. I have reasons to believe that with this step in the budget, and together with a few other things like registration of the vehicles possibility, because when you have a battery swapping in place, the title of the battery can't be with the vehicle, has to be, because otherwise the swapping can't happen, which we all understand. Therefore, these things are going to actually encourage, and I have reasons to believe that they fast track the adoption in a significant way, which even merely the availability of subsidy could never have done. So yes, in the given circumstances, I believe this is a very, very significant step, whether for commercial usage of two-wheelers or for personal mobility space. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, sir. Mr. Madan, if I can come to you now, you're working in the electric charging infrastructure space. Do you see battery swapping as an opportunity for companies like yourself in the EV charging infrastructure segment, or do you see this as a kind of a competition when it comes to the entire charging supply chain?
Okay. Sorry, just one correction. We are purely into battery swapping.
Okay.
And so, this is something that we started 2 years ago, and there was less belief in whether, the industry would go whether in the direction of charging or whether it would go in battery swapping. And we have been a firm believer that both will coexist, and, in different use cases. And like you touched upon the case of commercial vehicles, right? That's where we are operating in, purely in two-wheeler and three-wheelers, but targeting commercial segments. So that's where we believe that a charging would not be an appropriate solution. A personal mobility can still be served through a charging infrastructure, but specifically in commercial segment, we see that battery swapping would be the way that would be adopted across the industry. And like other panelists pointed out, it has several advantages. First being, it brings the cost of vehicle to 50%, and the ownership of the vehicle and the battery gets segregated. So it helps in the adoption of EVs over there. And in this budget, if we're talking about it has brought battery swapping to the forefront for us, and that's good for us. And everyone is talking about battery swapping now, which wasn't the case, couple of months down the if you see a couple of months ago. And secondly, the interoperability standards would be a good benefit for us, because once we reach a standardization of battery, that's where we face the biggest hurdle today as a battery swapping company. That the shapes and size of various vehicles, the batteries that fit, is what restricts the rotation of the assets, if I may say. And a standardization would help us in utilizing the same asset across various vehicles. So that's where we see both these initiatives as a good uh, thrust that has been brought in by the government in this budget.
Sure. I have, couple of follow-up questions actually when it comes to battery swapping. One is, let's say when we have standardized all the battery technologies and we have interoperability standards, we've also seen globally there have been various instances of batteries actually catching fires, right? So when you have battery available for swapping, how do you address the warranty or the penalties which may be leading to this kind of an instance, whether it will be the charging infrastructure company that will be responsible for this, whether it will be the battery manufacturers which will be responsible, or the OEMs where they will be fitted?
So one thing the standardization would bring is the specs would get standardized for the kind of batteries that you make. Okay. The second, about catching of fires in these batteries, it depends a lot on the quality and the kind of thermal management that has been deployed in that particular battery. So if we'll have to see whether that kind, the standardization from a thermal management or something of that sort is brought in the policy or not. But if it is not, in that scenario, like the way currently it works, it's basically the uh, battery swapping company and the OEM's warranty that comes into play, which is a private agreement between the two parties. But it's generally between the battery swapping company and the OEM on who takes on the warranty if such an instance occurs.
Sure.
Mr. Shamsher, I want to say something here.
Sure, sir.
You have to understand one thing. This battery swapping doesn't mean that the vehicles will be designed and developed completely independently without considering the kind of battery and BMS it is going to actually implement. It has to be a joint affair. So therefore, the responsibility will lie on both the OEM as well as the battery service provider, because they'll be jointly developed between the two. And of course, if the vehicle is not good quality, even if you have a very good quality battery and BMS, it still can catch a fire and create a lot of problems. So there has to be regulations on all front. Can't
Mhm.
be independently and on a battery. This is slightly complicated, but then there are examples of this. And I was at one point in time working with the company as a director for them in Kimco in Taiwan. So Gogoro and Kimco in Taiwan, actually, they have implemented it very, very successfully. So we have examples for this. So I don't think this is going to be too big a problem. Yeah.
Okay, sure, sir. That's helpful. Mr. Kumar, if I can come to you now and ask you to share your views on the battery swapping policy. Today, I mean, so far the consensus seems to be that battery swapping is essentially one of the most important puzzles that need to be addressed, especially when it comes to addressing the cost of ownership and the range anxiety is concerned. What are your thoughts, sir, on this? Do you see any challenges in its implementation?
Well, thanks, Samshir. And thanks, eMobility Plus, for inviting GoEgo Network. Maybe before I answer the question, it's good that I introduce the company. I don't know if everybody is fully aware what we do. So, GoEgo Network is a OEM of manufacturing the EVSE for both two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, and we are also the network provider for providing the network charging infrastructures. It is based on OCPP standard, which is used worldwide for charging electric vehicle with the EVSEs. If I have to answer the question around the battery swapping and the viability of, I would tend to agree with, I think, Ankur. where the our hypothesis were also like that both the charging infrastructure and the battery swapping will coexist, where the personal charging will be on the charging station on a company or the network like us, whereas the mostly the commercial vehicle, which is the last mile delivery, where the vehicles are and the batteries are owned by one party, the battery swapping facility will survive and also thrive. And if I look at the budget, there are quite promising steps presented by our finance minister, so which is quite welcome. I would also say I have not seen the details, but I would love if the industry goes to also towards the smarter BMS along with this interoperability which we are talking about. So if the BMS becomes smarter, it will not only solve the battery swapping part, but also the EV infrastructure part. So that could also help the captive solution, but as well as the commercial solution. So it's like how you do say, one stone and two birds. I think if industry goes towards that, it will help overall the EV infrastructure, which is the biggest, let's say, concerns in people's mind when they think about the electric vehicle, when they are thinking about buying an electric vehicle.
Sure.
So yeah.
Okay. So your view is also that battery swapping is certainly a welcome move, and if implemented in the most efficient manner, it is certainly going to address many of the challenges or the bottlenecks that the industry faces today.
Correct.
Right. I would just like to bring in another specific issue, to this forum, and if I don't see Mr. Singh actually being around, but let me come to you, Rajiv, first.
Yeah.
One of the areas that we've understood from some of the other entities that we interact with
Yeah.
on battery swapping is that look, the EVs are actually charged at 5% GST, whereas batteries, if you buy them separately, they will be charged at 18%. And battery swapping, which is going to be a service in the future, there will be a GST of 18% on that as well. So do you see this as a potential challenge going forward, and how do you think that can be addressed actually?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the question, Shamshar. And yes, that is definitely a potential challenge because, see, when you look at the overall objective and solution in totality, one of the reasons why EVs are being brought as one of the considered under the prime sectors, right? With a lot of focus of the government that is going into is the prime focus is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, to reduce our dependency on oil import bills, and then as I would say, committed by our supreme, right, Shri Narendra Modi ji at COP26 Glasgow, where he said that by 2070 India would be a net zero emission country. Now, with transport sector contributing to 30% for pollution, it cannot be possible without, at least by 2070, without close to 100% conversion of vehicles from a conventional fossil fuel to either electric vehicles or a hydrogen fuels and technology or any other green right technology, which doesn't necessarily have tailpipe emissions. Now, when the objective is that, I think this I would say the structure of disincentivizing the batteries if those are not clubbed up with the industries, with the vehicles, and then again bringing these battery swapping under this 18% slab. I think these are confusing signals and confusing acts. The government must look at the overall totality and overall universe, and then the objective in the picture, and then bring anything that is to do with green mobility, anything that is to do with clean mobility, be it the batteries, be it the vehicles, be it the swapping, be it energy as a service, whatsoever it is, right? I think they all must be brought under the 5% tax slab only, so that there are no confusions, and the companies also need not, I would say, waste or invest so much time only to see now how do I get this particular invoice done because I wanted to only buy gliders from here and then battery from here. I think it should be made more conducive, so all such kind of confusions should be abolished, and the earnings from this delta of 13% is much meager compared to great clarity
Mhm.
and great push that
Mhm.
those small acts would give to the industry. So in my opinion, That's something which the government needs to act upon immediately and bring everything under the 5% slab only.
Fair enough. I think that makes a lot of sense. Mr. Narang, if I can come to you now, sir. I might be digressing a little from the discussion that we are having right now, but I think this is also equally important to look at right now. Now, if you look at the recent trend in the raw material prices that make up battery, whether it is lithium, battery grade lithium or cobalt or manganese, there has been a significant increase in the battery raw materials over the past 1 year or so. And as demand for batteries is going to pick up, there is going to be a demand supply gap for some of these, cathode materials, particularly given the long gestation period involved in mining it and refining it, then bringing it to the level that we need to be. Now, in this context, do you think recycling of batteries, especially, is the need of the hour, where the government also needs to focus on, especially when we are talking about battery swapping, where the usage of batteries is going to be far more, and hence the recyclability will come up much more faster.
I think that's a very valid point. My background, I used to be, a very significant commodity hedge fund trader in my younger days. I'm an old man now, but I follow commodity prices very closely. Copper, manganese, all the raw material prices have skyrocketed, right? And there is a reason for it. The control of the supply, is significantly in the hands of the Chinese. I mean, this is a fact. I'm not saying something that is controversial. I think when demand skyrockets the way it is doing now, prices will go higher. We have got, we are the only, three-wheeler supplier that does fixed, swap and fast charging. We have diversified. We have secured our supply lines. We have worked with our customer, our suppliers. We are working on building our own battery, supply chain. I think that there will be, I believe over a period of time, this is a short-term commodity prices, for the 30 years I've been involved with in commodity markets are cyclical. So yes, the prices are going, but supply will exceed demand in the future. Short-term prices are going to be, but I believe in the long term, prices are going to be significantly lower, much more efficient, much more range. I think that we are working with some European and American battery players to build batteries which are much more efficient, much more cheaper, and are not as dependent on these raw materials. Now, in the short term, we'll have to deal with this. And I think that, but with the fuel price at, 100 rupees plus, we are building a global, cargo company, whether it's in Africa or whether we are doing in, the ASEAN. We see, energy prices very high, oil prices very high, diesel prices very high. I think that there are going to be batteries that are going to be more efficient. There's a lot of work going on. I think that the recycling is an area that we are looking at. We have aligned with some Canadian companies in that space. I think that this is all, the US presidents always say all options are on the table. All of us have to have all options on the table. We've got to, I keep saying this to everybody, is that make sure your supply chains are stable. Make it in India. There's a reason. Look, Prime Minister Modi ji and Nitin Gadkari ji and everybody's talking about making India and value. There is a reason. If you don't secure your supply chains, this game is going to be very difficult. Somebody says, I'm going to make 10 million motorcycles or scooters. And somebody says, I'll sell 50,000 three-wheelers. Until you have your supply chains locked up. And, coming from a very strong commodity background, I focus seriously on the commodity supply chains. If you don't have your supply sorted out, you won't be able to fulfill the demand. And in electric vehicles, we've got to make sure that as a community and as a country, as a group, there are no competitors. I don't see any competitors. I see a whole lot of ecosystem building going on here. And I think if somebody raised a couple of 100 crores, a couple of 100 million, I actually applaud that, because more and more people that come, India is a big enough country where different players can get involved. And it doesn't only mean that the existing players, and Tesla has shown that to all of us, that the existing players are going to have to fight it out for this, because they are guys like us, and there's some people here. I would say we are born electric, right? So coming back to you on the recycling side, Yes, we are looking at it. We are building alliances with some Canadian and Israeli companies that we have aligned with to do this. But I also think that having batteries that are more efficient, that's got more range, and also safety. Please understand, sometimes in India we go for cheap. Cheap means, in America we say, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So we've got to understand that in this environment, we've got to look at safety first. And by doing safety cells, we don't buy the complete crap, cells from China or from another reject country that is not safe. So we've got to be careful. We've got to run marathon in this electric space. I see a lot of players in our ecosystem just buying stuff which is cheap and selling it. I think that's a very, very wrong, way of approaching the business. I think what is good to see is people in the charging and the battery on the EV side are talking about quality. And we've got to do this by building at OSM. What we have done is built alliances globally, whether it's the Japanese or the Koreans or the Israelis or the Thais, to work with us in India to develop this. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Singh, I think we're glad to have you back. So, before you joined back, we were discussing about one pertinent issue, which actually, is there towards addressing the battery swapping solutions. Is that, today the, vehicles are charged at 5% GST, whereas batteries on a standalone basis are charged at 18%. And wherein battery swapping services are also, attracting 18% GST. So this is one of the anomaly which the industry participants actually give us feedback on. What is the government's view on this, and how do you think this will be addressed?
This is actually a larger issue. In fact, not only to you, there are several representations to us also. And I think from our side, from the Niti Aayog side, definitely we are raising this issue. And from the government perspective, I think soon, once this policy has been announced that battery swapping policy will come out, and we are working on this. Niti Aayog is going to come out with the battery swapping policy within the next 60 to 90 days, along with the standards also. In fact, as we speak, today we had one big meeting regarding the interoperability as well as the four different standards. In fact, I already spoke about it. Somehow the connection got disrupted in between. So this anomaly definitely has to be addressed. First one, that 18% on the separate battery. But the thing is, how we will address that, we have to come out with a solution that how the battery which is going to be purchased separately is going to end up in vehicle only. That there are other spaces where this particular battery can be put to the the industrial usage. It can be put to the battery power storage at the home and other places. So that is something, that mechanism we have to come out. And in fact, in this regard, I already had discussions with battery OEMs, and in fact some of the charge point operators also who are working in the battery swapping space. That's how this is going to be addressed. So we are continuously in touch with the industry. They are also helping us out.
Your voice, all of a sudden, it has become small.
Is it
Yeah, now it's
audible
better.
now?
Yeah, now it's fine, sir. Now
Now
it's
it's
fine.
better.
So how because this and this thing from other side has also needs to be addressed. So industry sees the one side, we have to see the entire umbrella, how this is going to impact the other parts also. So before we address, come out that we start charging 5% on this, so tomorrow this may happen that 5% is being charged on this, and then that it is going to cannibalize the other part, which for the industrial usage and all, wherein we should not do this subsidy perspective.
Sure,
So yeah, definitely this anomaly has to be addressed.
sure.
Service charge thing, I wouldn't address as of now, because there are other angles to that.
Mhm. Yeah. Mr. Chaudhary, if I can come to you now, sir. Just thinking from a different perspective, if we have standardization of battery packs, designs, their quality, etc., etc., do you think it will, in a way, limit innovation in the
Hold
industry?
on. Mr. Devan, standardization perspective, only these 4 5 things are going to be addressed. Dimensions, minimum weight, because from the ergonomics perspective, nobody can have the 14 kg or 15 kg or 12 or 13 kg of the batteries weight, and then people can carry it. From the ergonomics perspective, that is one thing. connector has to be standardized because otherwise there is no interoperability within this, and the minimum kilowatt hour which it will have. What type of chemistry and other things are going to come between within this? The standards are not going to address those things. So these are
Sure.
the 4 5 things. So just to make clear, that these are the things which are going to be addressed. It is not going to hinder the innovation at all. There
Sure.
is a complete room for the innovation within this, and it
So,
has and
okay.
all these things are being done in discussion with not only the battery OEMs but also the vehicle OEMs, because space in vehicle sector is like a real estate.
Hmm.
So that when we are fixing the dimensions, connectors, and other things, everything is in discussion with them. So nowhere this part which you are saying is going to be a hindrance. Innovation is not going to be a hindrance at all.
Sure. So the policy is
Technology
going to be
agnostic.
technology agnostic. Certainly.
We are not going to touch the technology at all.
Okay. Mr. Chaudhary, would you like to
Yeah.
share your views
So
here?
yes, of course, of course. So thank you, Mr. Singh, to clarify. I mean, for clarifying this. Please understand the innovation in case of battery, or for that matter, in case of EV, is not actually on the form factor, not actually on the the how the battery looks like or what is the shape or the dimension of the battery. It actually will be in three different areas. One, of course, as Mr. Singh mentioned, in the chemistry of the cells,
Hmm.
because that is one area which probably tomorrow we would get to see that some kind of battery which charges much faster, retains charge for a much longer duration, and therefore increases your range, etc., which is not really going to impact the form factor. Number one.
Hmm.
Number two, the second part is the telematics and the connected part of the battery, which is very, very essential to have a successful battery swapping network.
Hmm.
Because when a person is actually swapping the battery, he is also using the charge, and therefore he has to pay per charge or pay per kilometer or something. How will you calculate that? It is something similar to that of a mobile telephone plan or mobile telephone connectivity plan, right? So when you are having a handset and using some kind of a plan, you're paying X amount of rupees. You're using different kind of a plan. You're So this is all controlled, monitored, and measured by some kind of a software system. So if the battery is not connected, then it will not happen. And therefore, this is another area where the experience will increase, and therefore the software, etc., will be. So that is nothing to do with this. And the third thing is, if indeed there is a development which requires a change or modification in the form factor or the decisions that is being taken, will also undergo some change.
Hmm.
Everything is, dynamic in nature. Therefore, I don't see any reason for, because regulation actually improves your quality and improves the experience instead of, stifling anything. So I don't see any reason for anyone to worry. And this is on the agenda of the government today in the to implement EV for variety of reasons. So I have all the reasons to believe that it will not stifle the innovation at all. So
Hmm.
everybody will be mindful about that. Yeah.
Sure. Mr. Madan, if I can come to you now, I mean, in the interest of time, you're working on the EV battery swapping side. Certainly, this is going to be very capital intensive in nature.
Right.
Now, from the perspective of securing long-term financing and very innovative solutions towards financing, what would have been your ask from the government, from the budget, and do you think what more can be done to really give that kind of an infrastructure status or a priority sector lending status to this particular subsegment of the overall industry?
So the interest in the segment in EV segment as a whole has actually grown over the last 6 months or so. And for startups like us, more than the government impetus, it's about how much the private VCs are interested in financing this, and as well as finance companies, leasing companies taking up initiatives. Okay, so in the last 6 months, definitely we have seen that there's this whole change across the financing industry as a whole, where they are willing to invest in companies like us, as well as roll out leasing started changing in the last 6 months. That has already started per se. But any government impetus on this would obviously fasten up the things.
Sure. Mr. Kumar, if I can come to you and take some of the questions from the Q&A chat box. One question is on developing in-house R&D. I think one of the fellow participants also here talked about that. What is rightfully being done at the ground level to really encourage technology solutions which are very pragmatic for the Indian.
So, yeah. Shamsher, can you hear me? Because there was a lot of static, but I think I could hear the question. The question is around the R&D and what's being done to promote the R&D for this sector.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. I think one of the panelists also mentioned about that it's a quite cash intensive technology, because we are building from the scratch. A company like us, we are spending as a startup approximately 35% of the my total budget on the R&D, because if you look from the two-wheelers, three-wheelers perspective, the standards are not there. The connectors, whether it's from the supply side or from the OEM sides, these standards are not there. So finding a balance and spending those on what could be a success is going to be quite challenging. And at this moment, to be honest, I don't see anything which, let's say, is encouraging from the, whether it's the government side. It's only the, I think somebody mentioned about the private investors or the investors who believes in this industry, that this is going to be the future, are helping us out. But at least from my perspective, I think the government could do more. And now the time has come when we say, Atmanirbhar, we have to also walk the talk, and by providing some incentive for OEMs like us who could spend more on the R&D to be really, a step ahead, because two-wheelers problem is not in the Western world for the EVs. This is a problem of India and maybe some part of the Asian countries and the Africa. So for us, the time has come where we could really lead this and make a global standard where India could be the leading, and people should can follow us.
Sure, sir. That's very useful. So, in the interest of time, I would like to thank all the panelists for taking out valuable time and sharing their insights into, the recent announcement with the budget. Clearly, I think the key takeaway from our discussion today is that battery swapping is clearly a welcome move by the government. It addresses one of the key missing puzzles in the overall pie. However, there is a long way ahead for us. There are certain other things that need to be addressed, including providing both financing at the retail level as well as at the wholesale level. With this, I would like to thank you, all of you, for taking out time. We hope you found this session quite useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you
Thanks a
very
lot.
much.
And well moderated, Shamshar. Thank you. You brought wonderful insights. And thank you, all the co panelists, for your valuable, I would say, words of wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all our esteemed panelists for joining us today and for this wonderful session. Special thanks to Samsher sir for superbly managing the session. And with this, we have come to the end of this virtual event. Thank you everyone for extending your time and support for the event. With a promise to come back with more exciting topics very soon, it's time to sign off. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.